and Associate Vice President of Public Engagement and External Relations for Memorial. And welcome to the Memorial University Community Hub's information session. Before we get going, I want to do the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to acknowledge the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatuavut, and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original peoples of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. This is essentially a Zoom call like any meeting, so you can turn on your camera or mic as you see fit, and you can use the raise your hand function. Kathy Newhook and Mandy Rousel from the Harris Center are helping out with the support in this meeting. And we have Pat Curran, who many of you will know, who have backgrounds in rural development, who's been helping us out with some of the preparation of the RFP, dealing with our procurement office and so on. And Mary Perez is someone who is in the middle of this project as the coordinator based at our Grenfell campus. And these folks will introduce themselves as we go along, as we get into the Q&A. We have the session being recorded, so be aware of that. If you want to join in, we hope you do. But we will post the session to our website for anybody who isn't able to make it today, who wants to take advantage of the discussion we're having. Kathy, anything else I should have covered up front, or will we switch right to the presentation?
I think that's about it. So we're good to start the presentation. I'll share my screen for that, Rob, and you can let me know when to change slides.
Great. And we'll probably run straight through the presentation, folks, because there may be questions you would ask that are addressed on subsequent slides. But we're more than happy to go back and forth with whatever's covered with the Q&A. And between the group of us, I should also mention that Gerald Anderson is attending from our committee that will be dealing with the RFP. And I'll mention the other members of the committee as we go through. So bring up the slides there, Kathy. There we go.
All right, you should be able to see those. And
yep.
I'll go into.
Do you have a different version?
I do. Yeah. Presentation mode.
Bingo. We'll go to the next slide.
Yep.
So we'll give you some background on this initiative here this morning and what the key objectives are. We're hoping there's lots of you out there who have connections or involvement with various organizations who are interested in becoming a hub. As part of this Memorial University initiative, we know there's all kinds of hubs out there already. And this is about partnering with Memorial. And we have a few different types of hub that we have in mind. This is a pilot project. You'll hear me say that many times over 2 years. And so this is very much a learning opportunity for us all. And we'll talk about who can apply, and then some of the evaluation criteria and the process that we'll be following, and then next steps, and then lots of opportunity for discussion, question and answer. Next slide. And so this process began with our Grenfell campus, actually, at the outset of the pandemic, when it was very clear that there were students and community learners who did not have access to broadband, or good internet at least. And when our president, Vianne Timmins, early on, when there was a break in the pandemic, was able to do a tour across the island and Labrador, she spoke to lots of students and parents and community leaders who reinforced the point that we need better access to broadband, but in the meantime, we needed some innovative mechanisms. And so the beauty of the Grenfell pilot, partnering with 2 of the Indigenous groups on the West Coast in Port Saunders and in St. George's, and in partnership in St. George's also with the Flat Bay Band. And in Port Saunders, it was also a partnership with the women's organization there, where they had existing office space and meeting space that did have access to high speed, and were willing to make it available for students and others to collaborate. And so the president asked a group of us to get to work to see if we could extend this province-wide. And we worked with ACOA and the provincial government, and have another project we'll talk a little bit about that's looking at Arctic and Northern connections. And so this initiative is a result of all that, very much responding to bottom up and then thinking about where we can go from here. And it is a pilot, and so we want to learn from what we do in this first phase. And I'll discuss a little bit about how, if all goes well and we get enough interest, we won't even wait the 2 years to try to get some more funding to expand it, but don't want to get ahead of ourselves either. Next slide. So the objectives, we want to enable physical space with connectivity so that Memorial can collaborate with groups and organizations. Of course, we have loads of connections province-wide already. We have the Grenfell campus, and we have the Bombay Marine Station. We have Labrador Institute, now a campus, and a new School of Arctic and Subarctic Studies, and location in Northwest River. And the Marine Institute has locations in several locations around the province. And but also, of course, there's loads of partners out there. The College of North Atlantic has campuses in, I think, 17 locations around the province. But lots of other organizations that have space who we partner with. But this is a way to try to formalize that and to make the most of the connectivity and the programming. So this is not about Memorial establishing new locations. It's about Memorial partnering with organizations that already have their own facilities and who want to partner. And then make that space available for residents, for students, connecting with Memorial activities more. Obviously, the partners already run their programming, and this doesn't change that at all. But maybe there are things that once we're working together more, we could collaborate and co-produce new types of programming. And it can be for meetings and collaboration in this space. Public engagement is all about the inside of Memorial, working with the outside partners on all kinds of different things that relate to research, teaching and learning, but other activities as well. It could be for MUN students to have access to quiet study space in areas where they don't have access now. Certainly access to courses online. And again, many folks can do that online from their own home. But if you don't have good broadband, this helps address that in the short to medium term while the federal and provincial initiatives extend all this. Alumni, Memorial graduates are all over the province, and Memorial friends are all over the province. And we have lots of online activity now through alumni engagement, but also potentially as the pandemic eases up, and we seem to be getting there, more in person, and these spaces could be available for some of that. Could be more community gatherings with Memorial programming. Again, the spaces probably have that already with their own memberships. Community engagement, where we work together on new projects, and then community-based research projects. Memorial has a lot of interest in expanding continuing education, and we see a lot of opportunities for that in the future. Next slide. So for community partners, there's any number of reasons why they might want to be a member of this hub initiative. Your space will become a direct channel from your community to the university and vice versa. Again, anybody can do that with online events already. but we want to be more proactive in developing programming in partnership with community partners. And maybe when there's online events, there could be 10 or 15 or 20 people want to get together in person so that they're not just at home online, but sharing an event together. It's an opportunity to become part of a new network. So we want 10 or 15 or 20 initial hubs in this initiative. And we have some staff led by Mary Perez at the Grenfell campus who will coordinate and communicate and build a bit of a community of practice. And how can we use these hubs to facilitate more connection with university programming? And how does that connect with other programming, with the college, with municipalities, with libraries, with Indigenous groups, or whoever the partner is? We want to look at what opportunities we can book. And, you know, if there's MUN units that currently already, and more so as the pandemic eases off, book physical space in locations around the province for training, education, community education, and they pay for space. We want these hubs. And when we met with COA and the province, they were very clear that funding for a 2-year pilot would be a great idea. But what do we do when that funding runs out? And as we all know, if you're involved in community development, sustainability is key. And so existing organizations own their space and they can do what they want with it, obviously. But if Memorial is proactive in booking space with these new partners, we expect events that people pay to attend that would normally be renting a location will rent these spaces. And we're thinking initially for the pilot, 50% of that revenue would go to the local partner, but 50% would stay with the Memorial Hub network so that we can build sustainability going forward. It wouldn't be taken by Memorial back into the Memorial mothership. It would stay with this initiative. And as it evolves, we're going to figure it all out. But, you know, there could be locations that are very, very busy, generating lots of revenue. There could be other locations that are less active. And so the 50% that Memorial keeps of the revenue might help subsidize locations that are less active, kind of like Canadian equalization formula. We're not going to get quite that complicated, but you get the idea. This will then become a collaboration platform so that Memorial, working with local organizations, local business, local citizens, can develop programming together. And we do have some funding with the government support to enable, we have type 1, 2, 3, and 4 hubs in mind in the initial conception. Type 4, we're thinking of as possible partners with government agencies, with the college, with larger municipalities that already have space, that have staff there. They wouldn't receive funding, but they would become part of the initiative for the collaboration. And as we generate incremental revenues, share that with the network and with their own location. But then the types 1, 2, and 3, the initial hubs at the Grenfell campus are our initial type 1 hubs. But we can discuss as we get into the session some of the types of funding we have for type 2 or type 3. And that will help get the hubs up and running. And then as we learn through the pilot, there could be other revenue opportunities. And so we want to explore all that together. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's various types of support. At this stage, we have for the type 2 and type 3 hubs for office supplies, equipment, some part-time facilitation support. We will be looking as the applications come in at which partners are more in need of that financial support to get up and running. And it's on a sliding scale, and we'll develop a partnership agreement with every partner selected. But we'd really love to get more applications than we have funding, because then we can look at other federal, and we even have some European Union funding we're looking at through a partnership relationship that potentially before the 2 years are up, we can say, look, we had funding for 8 or 10 initial hubs, but we had applications from 30. And I'd love to be able to do that and then see what we could go from there. As I mentioned, there's a revenue sharing model in mind where any revenue generating events, a lot of events are free. We don't ever see charging students for access. Clearly, they need to work within the existing location, hours of operation. And if you have something booked for your organization, it's clearly not available for other stuff. But depending on the configuration of the space, maybe there's a main office area, but then there's a separate meeting room. So one size will not fit all. But if there's room to book and charge for events that charge for
Oh, Rob, sorry, you accidentally got muted. You were talking about groups that can charge for different activities, but not all activities, of course, would be revenue generating. Sorry.
Right on. Well, that's pretty much where I am. People often wish they had the way to mute me. So thanks, Kathy.
I have the power, apparently, but it was by accident, I promise.
So if we missed anything there, people certainly come back and ask questions. And then finally, this is a province-wide network. And we see some larger organizations becoming hubs. We're keen to see the College of North Atlantic, wherever they have locations where Memorial is not, which is in many areas, depending on space and interest, but also larger municipalities or other organizations wouldn't receive funding, but could be part of the revenue generating sharing. But more importantly, the collaboration and getting the activities out there. Okay, next slide. So who can apply? There's some basic requirements. You need to be a legal entity. And so local governments, including local service districts, incorporated nonprofit organizations, Indigenous organizations like the initial 2 we've partnered with, Crown corporations or agencies or other government agencies, obviously. And so they would all be potential, and we're happy to explore other types of organizations, but with the type of partnership agreement, you need some type of legal status. And if you don't have it and you want to partner, maybe there's another organization in your community or region who you can partner with. Insurance, of course, as a public space, and most of these organizations already would have this because you already are a public space in all likelihood with commercial general liability insurance. And then again, accessibility. And we would see the partners working within the existing Provincial Accessibility Act and appropriate regulations. And again, most, if not all of these spaces would already, according to the type of organization you are, have that capability. Next slide. So we have a committee I'll speak about that will be looking at the evaluation criteria for the applications that come in. And first, we'll be looking at community need in terms of the funding that's available on that sliding scale. So is there a need for a community hub? What other services already exist? Is there concern about access to internet and collaborative space in the area? And how much demand do you expect you could have? We are working with the provincial government and the federal government to make sure that the funded hubs will be in areas that in the short to medium term have less access to broadband, but that the hub itself has high-speed internet. Is the space suitable? So as mentioned, different locations have different configuration. Do you have office space that wouldn't be suited for a continuing ed type activity? Well, that probably isn't going to be appropriate for this initiative. So do you have a boardroom or a meeting space or a part of your space that does now have a large screen TV or could have one? And are you able to conduct your normal activities while other stuff is going on? Or do you have flexible hours? And how can we work around that? So that's a really important point that we'll be looking at. Really important is the hub vision and type of programming that you see, because we'd love to have partners who have existing activities or see future opportunities to work with Memorial, and what kind of champions are there locally, because none of this is going to work without people on the ground wanting to make it work. And so that'll be a key part of the application process. And then community hub capacity and sustainability. We'll be looking at what type of organization is there. This is a 2-year pilot, but ideally we'd love for this to extend for a long, long time. And so the existing group's capability to maintain this activity, what kind of staffing do you have on the ground? We have some funding for the type 2 and 3 hubs for facilitation support, but when the funding runs out, hopefully we'll be generating revenues that can contribute to that. Hopefully we'll find additional funding, but that's part of the consideration. And then what kind of supports are needed? What else do you at the local level think you need for this to work? And some of that may be available with our existing funding. Maybe we need to look for additional funding as we go forward. But at the beginning, I think for the initial hubs, we need to work within the funding we have. And so we want to meet need, but we also need sufficient capacity to get it off the ground. And that's always a balancing act, of course. And finally, diversity. We want to make sure that we're aware of any traditionally underrepresented or underserved groups that the hub could reach out to or is already doing and could be part of the hub. Who are the partner groups involved? Really key to have a mix of organizations where appropriate. We're also really keen in this initial pilot to have a cross-section of hubs across the province. We're not looking at, there could be unfunded hubs in the Northeast Avalon, but that wouldn't be our priority, and obviously with the high-speed access criteria. But when you get off the Northeast Avalon to southern part of the Avalon Peninsula, down around Placentia area, out around the Bay of Verde Peninsula, but then you get out to the Isthmus. I won't work you all the way across the island and into Labrador, but you get the idea. It'd be great to see some cross-section of the different types of hubs across the island and in Labrador. And in Labrador, we're already in discussions through our Labrador Institute and Labrador campus with the Indigenous organizations there, but also Lab West, Labrador Straits, etc. But also it would be great in this pilot to have a cross-section of types of organizations, some municipalities, some libraries, some business organizations, some NGOs, etc. And so we'll see what type of response we get, and the review committee will work with that. Next slide. So we'll have this, oh, no, I think you jumped ahead one. Thanks. So we have the request for proposals is out now. It closes April 14, and we're doing this through the MUN procurement office. So it has all the transparency and rigor of any procurement process, even though it's a more collaborative partnership approach than many types of purchasing agreements, obviously. But, we'll be pretty strict on the deadline for April 14, and hopefully they come in before then. We have a review and selection by a committee that has representation from our Grenfell campus, Dr. Kelly Vodden, our Marine Institute, Gerald Anderson, who's on the call today, recently retired, but still very active and very knowledgeable throughout the island and Labrador and beyond across the north. From our Labrador campus with Dr. Ashley Consolo, and from the Harris Center with Sheila Downer, based in Straits of Labrador and very active for many years with Smart Labrador and the ACOA Enterprise Network. A lot of colleagues have said a lot of this is reminiscent of some of those programs. And Boyan First from the Harris Center will be supporting this, as well as Mary Perez, the coordinator for this project, based at our Grenfell campus. And then after we go through the review process and selection by the committee, they'll come back to the steering committee and we'll approach the initial partners to develop partnership agreements. We have a draft partnership agreement prepared, but again, this is new, it's a pilot. So we're gonna figure out what works and get this up and running. So next steps, it's a 2-year pilot, but if we get a great response, I'd love to be chasing incremental funding within a couple of months so that we can expand the hub network. Some of the hubs won't need funding, as I've mentioned. And we think maybe 10 of those would be a good number to target initially, and then 8 to 10 with funding. And so maybe 20 initial hubs. But if we get applications from 30 or 40 communities, we'd love to get that so that we can then go to potential additional funders and say, are you interested? Here's the types of organizations expressing interest. We want to work with communities, no matter what the size of the organization. Mary, and we have some additional staff, are available to help you develop your submission. So don't be intimidated by what's on the website. And it's all about collaboration. The community brings loads of knowledge and expertise and capacity. We have some at Memorial, and working together gets lots of great results, as we've seen with public engagement over the decades and with all our recent efforts. So last slide, Mary Perez is the point person. I'll be quite hands-on with this exercise over the next couple of months, and the rest of the Harris Center team, along with Go Engagement at Grenfell, the Labrador campus, our colleagues at the Marine Institute. So we're quite excited, and it's a new process, but we're all working together. We'll see where it goes. So Kathy and Mandy, I don't know if you open up to the people on the screen there, or you can raise your hand if you have a question, and please introduce yourself if you do have a question or comment. And you can also raise questions in the chat, and Kathy is going to monitor those and let me know. Kathy, any questions, comments there already?
I don't see any questions coming in the chat, and I don't see any hands up.
I'm sure in the usual manner, I've answered everything anybody could possibly think of. Ha ha. And Mary or Boyan or Pat Curran, any items you thought I brushed over too quickly that you would want to add to?
Nothing that you brushed too quickly, but I just wanted to introduce myself and just let everybody know that I will be available for questions after this session as well. And you can reach out to me by email, and I'm here to support your application process as well. If you need any assistance, any clarifications, I'll be here along with other staff members.
Thanks, Mary. And I see a hand up there, Kathy.
Yeah, Russ, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Here we are. Good morning.
Good morning, Russ.
How you doing?
Best kind, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. Very, very well done there. Well, my name is Russ Hancock. I'm working with the Southern Labrador Development Association, and we have some interest in your program. I just have just one question. I was looking at your types of hubs, and I think we would probably, if you went for this, would try to get into the type 1 hub. And what the partner provides, it says space with furniture. I'm just wondering, what types or kinds of furniture would you envisage for a small hub like we would have?
Right on. Well, I can jump in, and then Mary, who's been working closely with the initial hubs that Grenfell has done, especially the one in Port Saunders. So, I think around the province, I've traveled a lot over the years with rural development associations and the Red Bees and municipalities. And so I think it's important that the space would be big enough that you'd have probably a boardroom table or a few tables and chairs, enough for ideally 10 or 15 or 20 people. One of the questions we have as you get into the RFP, some things seem detailed, but if you're going to be doing webcasting of training or continuing ed or lifelong learning or hybrid meetings where some people are in the room and some people are elsewhere, we've all gotten used to during COVID especially, but over the years, if you have windows, ideally you want some curtains or blinds. Do you already have a big screen, or is that something that you'd be hoping to get with the funding we have access to? And Mary, anything you'd want to add to what I just said? And then Russ, feel free to come back at us with any further questions or thoughts. Mary?
I just wanted to add that even though there are some, I guess, expectations as to what's conducive for somebody to sit at, in front of a computer, at the same time, a lot of it depends on what's available to the community already. Like I know in Port Saunders, basically they have some of those fold-up tables that you can, put away for events and things like that, and chairs that are fairly comfortable for people, thinking that these are spaces where people are going to be learning. So whatever works, in to the degree that is available to the community.
Does that help, Russ, or any further thoughts on what we said there?
Yeah, really, that does help. Actually, what you just said in terms of requirements, we basically have already. We have a boardroom, we have a large screen, we have tables and comfortable chairs. But I'm just wondering if there's anything else in addition to that. For example, individual student learning, for example, what would you need? Some sort of a more individual type space rather than a large meeting room?
Right. And at this stage, my thinking, and again, Mary can chip in and others might have views on this. This has been largely an adaptation on the fly for students, Memorial students during the pandemic who were stuck home, who had to do their courses online. And if you were in an area where you didn't have access to broadband in your home, you could go to one of these locations, even just to sit for an hour or so and download course materials onto your computer. Ideally, if there's some quiet study space, you could sit there for a couple of hours. But I don't think we envision this as a space where you'd have cubicles or formal learning infrastructure for individual students. If there was a cubicle or two, great. But I personally don't see that as core to the vision of this. It's more like a space where there would be potentially like a small public library. As Mary said, some fold-up tables or some permanent tables, and there might be times of the day when someone could go there. And of course, students these days, everybody's wearing earphones all the time. So you potentially could work on your own with earphones in. So we don't envision you turning your space into a library or into a classroom, but it would be somewhere where if the Marine Institute was doing marine safety training in your area and they had 10 or 15 or 20 people booked and there isn't a better space nearby, or maybe even if there is, if you're part of the hub network, we're going to be encouraging these units of Memorial, and there's a lot of them, to book space, and they'd pay for it if it's something that people are paying to do the course. And so you'd want space for 8 or 10 or 15 or 20 people with an instructor or with an online, with a big screen TV, kind of back and forth. And we are working with Memorial has a group called CITL, the Center for Innovations in Teaching and Learning. I think I got that right. Used to be DELTS years ago. And they're the experts in learning pedagogy and in the type of screen you need for the size of the room and what type of speakers should be available and microphones should be available. And again, there's a lot of good new technology out there these days. And so you may have some of that already, but we get their advice to help us help you to set up in the best way possible. But it doesn't have to be fancy. Mary, did I screw anything up there you'd add to?
No, you got it. I think that's it.
Yeah. Russ, anything further? And I do think we're getting some more questions, which is great, but feel free.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. That answers my question.
And feel free to come back at us if you got another question. Kathy, who's up next?
We have Francis, is it Scared?
Yep.
I'm not great at pronouncing last names. But before we go to Francis, you can go ahead and unmute, but I just want to draw people's attention to the chat because Angie in the chat as a student, has made a comment there about how individual rooms would be nice, but not necessary, but just to have a place to go other than her house to do homework would be great. So that just echoes lots of those comments. So I just want to make sure people were following that as well. So you can go ahead, Francis.
Hi there. Yes, a great pronunciation on my last name. I guess I'm in Gander, Newfoundland as we speak. And I guess there are certain, I'll call it supports currently available in the sense of like broadband internet is fairly widely accessible if you can afford it and things of this nature. But I think it kind of comes down to be in Central, the population is very distributed. Has there been any conversation about hosting, like say, extension type services, like where if there is a facilitator, full-time, part-time or whatever, that they would go to other communities to do physical programming similar to what's hosted at the current hub sites? Or if it's either at the current hub site, is either face-to-face or virtual from that site?
That's a great question, Francis. And it's exactly the kind of ideas that we're hoping and expect will come out of the blue as this conversation proceeds. So I'm quite familiar with Central Region, and Gander serves an area out around the Kittiwake Coast, from Gambo around New West Valley, all the way around to Gander Bay, and that's a massive territory. And so you're quite right. And so currently, different MUN units would already have outreach, depending on their programming and depending on the types of people who need the service. I know the Marine Institute has a great collaboration in Lewisport. Yep. So we don't have budget in the current initiative to cover that kind of cost. But if there was a facilitator at a site in Gander, say, and there was an opportunity to reach out to Gambo or New West Valley or you name it, I think that'd be really cool. And, Harris Center, we have staff who do Thriving Regions projects all over the province. And we start in a region with a group of leaders and identify needs. But we need physical locations for meetings quite often. And so I'd love to explore some of that further, Francis, as the project evolves. But even if your group or partners wanted to put some ideas into a proposal, that would be the kind of innovative approach I'd welcome. And again, Mary, I don't know if you have further thoughts on that or anyone else. Francis, did that kind of address what you were asking? Did you have anything further you want to add?
Well, yes and no. The other point that I'd like to make is that in Gander, there is a campus of the College of North Atlantic. I guess I'm on the road. I'm basically in my truck right now on my phone. So I think I might have missed you spoke of the College of North Atlantic and the like. So I didn't know, and maybe if you could just like not go over it again per se, but if there was any main point of view, like in Gander, there's a campus. So is that perceived to be where a hub site would be located and things of this nature? Or is it just that you're, like, well, basically what, in communities such as Gander that has an established College North Atlantic site, can you just kind of highlight where that in the hub perspective?
Yep, absolutely. So Memorial, of course, works very closely with the college province-wide all the time. And with the provincial government involved, and of course, Memorial and the college are both public post-secondary institutions. So we wanted to make sure that wherever the College of North Atlantic is located with a campus, if they have space and if they want to be involved in particular locations, they would have kind of the first right of refusal. So in Gander, depending on space and interest and other partners in discussions with the college leaders there, the college would be the go-to location if they wanted to be involved. And we're working with some of the people with the college at the provincial level. So I would encourage you, if you're with organization there in Gander, to speak to the local college people and see if they have space and interest. If they don't, there's no reason you couldn't look at other spaces in the community and come up with a proposal. I would say, because Gander has, to my knowledge, pretty good high-speed access in the community, it wouldn't likely be a hub location eligible for the funding we have for the hubs level 2 and 3 at this stage. But as I say, we really want to have hubs in a good distribution across the province. And so I would love to see a hub in Gander, either at the college or somewhere else. Does that help with that question?
It does, but I'll leave you with this message. Why? Just because there's the physical availability of high-speed internet doesn't mean that there's a large amount of students that are studying remotely that has access to that high-speed internet. Okay.
Yep.
I guess I'm a member of the Haldane First Nation. I'm a member of council. I speak to a lot of people, and thankfully it is available if you have the money. Okay. But there is a lot of people that is just not a high enough priority for them at this point in time. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're in a community that don't have it, obviously a node, a hub would be fantastic. But I do think, and I would counsel people that are not living in that world to recognize that communities such as Gander, Grand Falls is another community, has a significant demographic of people that do not have access to high-speed internet, or for that matter, a quiet space to download, like you just said. A coffee shop might sound great if you can get there, or something of that nature. So with all due respect, I think we need to remember that Gander is a thriving community, thankfully. It's the only community off the Avalon that's growing in population right now. But with that comes some challenges. Housing, municipal infrastructure, all this type of stuff is at the seams, and there's people getting lost in the cracks, and those are the people that need a hub site. So I sound like I'm preaching here now, so I apologize for that.
No, your point's very well taken and well made. And we will have someone from the provincial government advising us on our selection committee in terms of the access to internet. And I hear you in terms of individual families and individuals with limited or no access because of their personal situation. So, that's the kind of thing when you articulate in the RFP on need, that would be great to flesh out a little bit for the review committee to see. And I think it also will help inform as we move forward. As I say, I'd love to get more applications than we can fulfill at this stage so that we can chase additional funding. And so really important points and well taken. Kathy, do we have another hand up there? I think we do.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse. So there you go. Mike Keogh has his hand up next. And so you can go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Kathy. First of all, Rob, to Memorial University, the Harris Center, yourself and your team, thank you very much for all of the effort you're putting into this. It's certainly well needed. I had feelings for a few moments there of a flashback to the old extension services of Memorial University that was so successful in its day. But this is obviously much more deeper and much wider. Rob, I guess my question as well is a lot touches into what Francis was as well. Our group probably won't be in this because we don't have the legal structure, and we're formerly older workers, Newfoundland and Labrador, now experienced workers, Newfoundland and Labrador. Nobody wants to be old nowadays. There is a lot of development work on the go and initiatives to enhance our opportunities throughout the province. A major one right now in the going forward is by the province, and it has a fairly well advanced with the regional development committees, 10 of them, strangely enough, same as to your 10 hubs you mentioned about. And that was done with the excellent cooperation of a Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Center in Corner Brook. I guess I just want to be sure. I know they're focused on people development at this point in time, but I just wanted to be sure, get the feeling that you're all well tuned in together. Government officials are very heavily involved in that. You're talking about government officials will be involved in yours. So you may have already spoken to all each other. I don't know. I didn't hear it in your talk, but to avoid duplication of effort and to take advantage of the tremendous resources that Memorial brings to this table, and to people like NLWIC and College of the North Atlantic, that kind of interaction is taking place. And I just seek your confirmation on that.
No, absolutely. And great point. And I think I saw Sharon McLennan is online and with the Newfoundland Labrador Workforce Innovation Center. And of course, they're under the College of North Atlantic, but with provincial government involvement. And we work closely with Sharon on lots of stuff at the Harris Center. And the provincial government, as I say, is a funder and will be informing our decision process. But also we've met a couple of times now with the folks with the College of the North Atlantic provincially. And so absolutely, we don't want to reinvent any wheels here. And there's loads of great activities, programs, resources available. But there's also, as we know, lots of budget challenges. So the last thing we want to do is reinvent the wheel or overlap and duplicate. So a key thing we emphasize with this initiative is that the Hubs initiative is really about helping get a network of platforms, locations connecting with Memorial. The locations are already there. It's organizations that own space, that have activities, and they continue to do exactly as they're doing as they see fit. But we want to find partners who have available space so that we can promote and coordinate more Memorial activity there, but also work with the local partners and co-create. So where are there gaps or opportunities for innovation? And I think I saw Kelly Vodden has been able to join us, who is one of the key leaders at Grenfell campus in the development of the two initial hubs on the West Coast. And already now, Kelly is part of a big funded research project by the National Research Councils that fund university to do research. And there's hub partners involved in that in ways that no one would have conceived of when the project was starting. So we don't want to reinvent any wheels, but I do believe synergies, that overused word, but I like it, because 1 + 1 can make more than 2. If you come up with new ideas, use your own strengths and see where it goes. So hopefully that answers your question, and feel free to come back with clarification if you need, or Kathy, we can go to the next question.
All right, so I think Mike has turned his mic off, so we'll go on and he'll come back if he needs to. We did have a few questions in the chat that I wanted to draw people's attention to. So there is a question there about requirements for high-speed internet to be in place already, or would that be something that could be supported by the available funding? And then there's also a question there about, during the chat with Francis, about whether this situation would be similar to the St. Anthony campus and library. They are, I guess, Elizabeth Lee is there from St. Anthony and would think that the library there might be a good place for a hub. But they also have, of course, a CNA campus. And whether that would be the situation there, where they had to go to CNA first and then go to the library, how would that work, and whether or not the internet needs to be in place, or is that something that can be supplied? So I guess just clarification on those things.
Yep. Well, I'll do half an answer and then I'll turn to Mary to flesh it out a little more, I think. So with the College North Atlantic, with the provincial government support, we do want to make sure the college has first dibs in any location where they are. But of course, as community partners, I would encourage people to talk to the leadership at your local campus and see if they're interested in partnering and being a hub. And or if they're not, don't have space or interest, then that of course frees up another organization to play that role. In terms of whether you currently have access to high speed in your facility, Mary, can you confirm, do we provide funding for that under the funding we have approved? Or are we assuming that you do actually need to have it up and running in your facility now?
So a lot of it depends on the type of hub, but so the short answer to that is no. The entity doesn't have to have internet set up already. The whole project and process can include setting up the access to the internet. However, the financial support will depend on the type of hub that you're applying for or that you're proposing. A type, like the highest level of support type of hub will have funding for internet. However, other types of hubs don't have that type of support.
So we kind of have a sliding scale, and we'll see, we got to cut the suit to fit the cloth, or cut the cloth to fit the suit, whatever that expression is. And it's going to be a tough job for the committee seeing the range that comes in. And then we'll have a discussion, negotiation with the applicants who are selected to fit the funding to the need. So it's not the RFP is to get the initial group that we're going to enter partnership discussions with, and then we'll try to adapt the funding. But I think Mary's answer is yes, you can get support to get the internet hooked up. Obviously, you need to be in a region that has access to high speed. So does that answer those questions adequately, do you think, Kathy?
Here's hoping, but I'm sure whoever is still wondering about that will let us know in the chat otherwise.
Okay.
And Ron, I think, is next. And maybe Ron, you've already unmuted, so you're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Hey, Rob, I love your arithmetic. You didn't learn that in elementary school.
Math was never my strong point.
Anyway, no, I mean, it sounds like a wonderful proposal. It's kind of, but it also at the same time strikes me as being a bit, and I might not make any friends here, sorry. It feels a bit neurotic. Like what I'm hearing is the need came from realizing that there were a lot of students out there who didn't have broadband access. And you're thinking about a space where you can have teleconferences, where you can have community consultations, where kind of large organizations and project funding can be thrashed out. And so I'm a bit worried about that, because I think that kind of one idea might get overridden by another idea, and we're still in the into the third decade of the 21st century talking about public access internet. This is nuts. I should have introduced myself. I apologize. I'm the manager of public library services for the territory of Nunavut. Connectivity is a huge issue up here. One of the things I'll point out to you guys have, at least theoretically, access to the Starlink network in Newfoundland, which for about $1,600 a month, or sorry, $1,600 a year, you can have broadband access right in your home, if not your community, if your municipality decided to pay for it. That's a huge advantage. but again, I come back to, there's a class aspect to this that's really important to consider. The other thing is, I wouldn't get too caught up in the technology side of it. The simpler if you guys are going to roll out some sort of amazing teleconference technology, make it as simple as possible. We put new computers in our community libraries, and they're broken in a month. It's easier to kind of put in a Raspberry Pi with an operating system on an SD card, that if someone goes in and erases it, we, kind of the librarian who might, kind of only have grade 10 can take out the SD card and put in a new SD card, and everything works again. Because making it too complex, making it too fancy, even though everyone loves the bells and whistles, we all love bells and whistles, it's gonna kick you in the butt. And the other thing I'm wondering about, it's great to have these hubs. And this is the problem, certainly, that I'm continuously grappling with. How do you mobilize the community around the hub so that they realize the value of the service and start using it? Because it can be a real challenge. You're bringing people into a multi-use space, and so you'll have kids doing one thing over there, young adults doing another thing over there. Sorry, I'm thinking in public library terms. I'm not thinking in. When you come into a space that's being shared with an organization with another mandate, that can be a really fragile relationship, and it isn't always sustainable when the public starts accessing that space.
Great points, Ron. And I know you're in the trenches daily and very thoughtful on this stuff. A couple of things in response. One is to highlight, first of all, and we haven't really expanded on it here in this session, it's kind of a parallel project, but we do have funding from Global Affairs through our Geo Center that Kim Ship is the lead on at Memorial. And they have a science center youth outreach initiative. And part of the funding for that includes hubs for youth outreach in Arctic and northern regions, ideally in partnership with Indigenous groups. And as you are aware, Memorial is in partnership with Nunavut Arctic College. And so Sheila Downer is on this call now. Sheila is based in Labrador Straits, but she's a vice president with the University of the Arctic. And we're partnering with our Labrador campus to partner with communities on the Labrador coast and perhaps in Happy Valley Goose Bay, but also Nunavut. So you and Sheila and or Kim should follow up and have a conversation. And we do have funding available for those. And that way we get you inside our tent, providing all your knowledge and expertise. Also, on some of the points you made, we have met with the libraries board folks in Newfoundland and Labrador, and they've expressed a lot of interest in this initiative. And further to the lady, I think in St. Anthony, we'd love to see libraries as part of this. Part of your point, and again, you know this stuff way better than I ever will, as a multi-function space for some of the use we see for Memorial University partnering, it will depend partly, I think, on the configuration of the facility. So is there a separate room with a boardroom table and desks and a big screen TV? Because if it's all out in an open space, it ain't going to work for continuing education unless maybe it's after hours. And is that an option? And I think we're open to all of that. I would also emphasize, one size will not fit all. So we want to see variation and bottom-up ideas and ownership. As you say, this started at the early days of the pandemic. Most students are now online in Newfoundland and Labrador. Many are coming back to campus, but of course, continuing ed all the time involves a lot of online, but we'd like those spaces where people can come together for joint learning where it makes sense. So it is very clear, and I have a high tolerance for ambiguity. So this program is evolving, it's nebulous. People might shape it differently in different places. In terms of community buy-in and mobilization, that's part of the RFP process. So in an ideal world, the Harris Center, the Marine Institute, Labrador Campus, Go Engagement, go out and work with communities of all types and foster activity and build capacity. For this initiative, we need the applicants to show that they have some of that already, so that because we have funding, it's a pilot for 2 years, we'd like to be able to hit the ground running and make the most of this. But the Harris Center is going to be very proactive in this. Go Engagement at Grenfell is going to be proactive, Labrador Institute. And so we're going to have facilitation and community of practice and people at the community level sharing what's working in their area with other people. Mary is really the linchpin in all this as the coordinator. And so we're going to facilitate democracy and help get more activity. But we do need some initial capacity to step up and say, hey, we've got some ideas, we want to be part of this. Hopefully that addresses some of what you raised there. But would love to see you follow up with Sheila and Kim and see what we can do in none of it.
I would love to work on that.
Great. Kathy, who's up next?
We have another person who has their hand up. Ted Rowe is there with his hand up. You can unmute yourself, Ted, if you're there.
Yes, hi, thanks very much. I'm involved with the Hearts Content Community Development Corporation, which is looking to do community development in Hearts Content. And one of the problems that we have is that we have a vacant building there, which is the old Fisherman's Hall, which is in pretty good shape. We're trying to find a good readaptive use for it. And while I'm listening to the presentation and I've read the information that's online about the Hubs program, I'm still not sure if we're in a location that's going to be able to attract enough use of a hub space to make this viable. For example, I have no idea how many memorial students there are on the south side of Trinity Bay or in Conception Bay North that would be able to make use of a quiet study space and a place that they could download information for their work that they're doing, or how many people would be interested in continuing education in a space like this, or how much use there would be from Memorial and the various entities of Memorial. We're only 1.5 hours drive from St. John, so it's not as if there's a meeting of people from Trinity South or Conception Bay North. You would have to have it out in our area. So my question is, how can we get more information on those kinds of questions to see if this could be a viable use for us for that space in Hearts Content?
Well, I think in the immediate term, following up with Mary and having some conversations about some of the ideas you just articulated there. I know that area fairly well, and I know there's a lot of memorial faculty and staff who have summer places out in that area. And there's a lot of horsepower there that people are interested in that region. And I know there's other regions like it all over the place. And I think on continuing ed, there's a little bit of build it and they will come. So it's hard to know how many people would show up for continuing ed activities until you start to introduce some and promote them and make sure that they work. I know our alumni engagement unit during the pandemic moved to a lot more online programming, and they've done an amazing job. And a lot of their stuff is getting hundreds of people online. And in most cases, I would guess they're online from their own home. But I bet you if you advertised in your region that there was a continuing ed session on topic X, you'd get 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 people showing up to participate in a session online who could then have a facilitated discussion afterwards. I'm just making up for instances. But I think that's the type of collaboration and hybrid activity that uses the online, but also the in-person. And so your location, I certainly wouldn't discourage you from considering this, because an hour and a half is within reach of St. John's, but for a lot of people, it's too far to go in for a session and out the same day. And so I don't know if, Mary, anything you'd want to add to what I just said there?
No, I think you got it, Rob. And I put my email address in the chat for those of you who didn't catch it when the presentation was going on.
So Ted, I certainly wouldn't discourage you from exploring this further. I think there's a lot of reasons why it might be a fit.
Okay, thank you very much for the comments.
Okay. What else do we have there, Kathy?
Elizabeth Murphy has her hand up next. You can go ahead, Elizabeth.
I have a question about the focus, whether how high a percentage of the focus is on access for students who want to do Memorial University coursework versus how much would be on sharing of expertise that MUN could provide. For instance, someone at MUN can provide training on some issue that a group in the area is concerned with. It could be something from MUN-Med or any of those kinds of things. So would that be something that you would consider part of the focus for this project?
Absolutely. I think, as I've said, one size will not fit all. And the initial motivation for this at the beginning of the pandemic was for individual students who couldn't come to campus, who didn't have access to broadband at home. But we know the federal and provincial governments are spending a lot of money now to try to bridge the gap on those remaining areas that don't have broadband. As someone mentioned, there are other solutions available. I think the Elon Musk thing is working around the province, but it does cost money. So I think, a drop-in location for individual students should still be thought of as part of it. But I believe into the future, it's going to be more the type of stuff that you talked about in the second part of your comment. So continuing education for people of all ages, access to expertise from Memorial, but also access to expertise in the community. And that really is the essence of public engagement. And so as there's researchers doing a project on God knows what, name your topic, they could come out to the region, hold meetings, people show up who have an interest in that topic. And that's how you develop community-based research projects. And I mentioned about the project Kelly Vodden's involved in at Grenfell. That's a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project that came about through collaboration. And we all know that there's loads of opportunities throughout this province, but we got to tap into the best expertise, the best knowledge. And that's as much what this project is about. Is that helpful?
Yes, like last year we did a research project here on the needs of seniors, and some of the issues that were raised are like practical hands-on type things, but other things are related to, like, for instance, diabetes education. We have one person on the Burin Peninsula who is a diabetes nurse. She can't possibly deal with all of the people who have the need for that service in person. But if it was available, say, from MUN-Med, and we could bring a collective of people together in a space that had high-speed internet, then they could, as you said, have that discussion with the nurse or with the diabetes educator, whoever would be the person providing, and then have discussion among themselves about how they might be able to advance their cause a little further. So that's just one example of the kinds of things that came up in our research last year. And the area that I'm in is the Placentia West Development Association area. We have 7 small rural communities, and they're fairly well spaced out, but our location there on the highway is central to the region and probably would be beneficial for that type of service.
No, that sounds to me like a great potential fit. And the type of examples you're using there are, again, why we are so excited about this initiative, because we need to hear from people in the community. And, you know, the Harris Center and Go Engagement and Marine Institute, we all are connecting as best we can all the time. We have online tools like Yaffle for people to enter ideas for new projects. But a lot of this stuff really involves human interaction and facilitation. And we think through the Hub initiative and by Mary having a network of Hub facilitators who she talks to regularly, we need to know what are the topics, issues, opportunities that people around different areas need, and it might differ from one to the other. And then we can go into the university and find out who has expertise or projects and arrange for that to be shared. And by the same token, we're also meeting with people inside Memorial saying this Hub initiative is coming. What have you got available that we could be marketing out there? And so the Harris Center and Public Engagement and Go Engagement are all about being a bridge, inside out and outside in. So I really would encourage you to work with your neighboring communities, work with your partners, and think of this as a potential good fit.
Thanks.
You are welcome. Kathy, any others there?
No other hands up right now, and there doesn't seem to be any more questions in the chat. So I don't know if there's anyone who's been holding their question until the end, or if at an hour, and we've been an hour and almost 15, that we've answered all the questions.
And the key point is we're going to be available. Mary's going to be spending a lot of time on this over the next couple of months, but I am also. And Boyan First from the Harris Center is helping with the programming side, Kathy with the communications. We've got colleagues at Grenfell campus, Labrador, as I say. So this is the start of the conversation. And we really do encourage you to get in touch and download the materials. Ask Mary for support if you need it. And for now, I always like to pretend I'm at the regatta in these situations. All gone, all gone. So we're doing the last spin of the wheel. Any final quick questions here? All righty. Well,
If I could just jump in for a quick second, I just want to put a call out there. I won't name them, but there's a couple of students on this call attached to a course that Brady Reed is doing in Grenfell. So myself included, but I'm not a young student. I'm a very long in the tooth student, but this has been a very helpful piece, and the course is community sustainability. So it's as things go forward, you know, the course offerings, these offerings from MUN. I guess the gentleman there from far north also brought a sense of the reality of doing some of these. So it's a good thing. So thanks for your time, and kudos for the other students taking their time to participate in this session. So.
right on. No, thank you so much, Francis. And Brady, of course, as you probably know, was a key part of the process for the early hubs out of Grenfell campus, especially I think the one in St. George's. And that kind of Kelly Vodden may still be on, but Grenfell has a real strength in rural development, sustainable development, environmental policy. And so there's some really good courses available. And of course, St. John's campus has a ton of that as well. Kelly, did you want to jump in on that plug?
Sure, and I did just put a couple of Grenfell contacts in the chat for those who want to speak. Mary's at Grenfell, and so am I. Happy to talk with people about, I guess, what the first 2 hubs have been doing so far, and really excited to see everyone on the line and to build the network further. I think the comments about, you know, what kinds of programming and how we work together to make these initiatives community-based and driven, while at the same time, you know, a real partnership with the university and taking advantage of resources from the university, from CNA and elsewhere to bring those additional capacities to communities are all really important. And yeah, so it's a definitely work in progress. We're here at Grenfell to be part of the team, to continue to be part of the team, and excited about the potential, and still very much working with our community partners with the first 2 hubs to make that work. So if anyone's interested, or we can maybe also connect you with some of the community partners there or coordinators at those hubs if anyone's interested in that.
Right on. Thanks, Kelly. Any other final comments from any of our team? Mary, you're good? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for participating today. And we really look forward to lots of great conversations over the next few weeks. And tell your friends. And we really do want a good response to this, because we see a great opportunity for the initial pilot, but we also think we could expand it after that if there's enough demand. And based on the ideas and comments here today and our experience already on the West Coast, we're quite excited about it. So good luck to everybody, and hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.